Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. This is episode 55 for September 22nd, 2023. My name is Justin Young. Joining me, as always, are Alicia Utecht, Mario Sanders, and OJ Duncan. How's everyone doing?
I just want to let everyone know I am the third most powerful person on this podcast.
Okay.
It'll come up later.
For?
It'll come up later.
I feel like as a seniority thing, I would be okay being fourth.
I feel like I may be fourth as the faculty member. I have no real power. This is what I always tell my students when they complain to me about stuff. I said, do you think the university cares what I have to say? Like, you go complain to them. Like, they care a lot more about what you think than me.
Fact.
How's everyone's week been?
It's been very busy. It's been very busy. I need a break. I need a nap and a break.
We're less than 2 months into the semester and already I need a break time.
Oh, yeah. And it's only going to get busier. Once we hit October, I do not have a single weekend that I'm not traveling at least 2 hours. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great. I can't wait.
Is that mostly for conferences or personal travel?
It's a combination of both. I think I have... Because we have a performance festival, and then I guess I'm not traveling that next weekend, but we have the Kleinow show of it, and then I have a weekend with my sister in Chicago, and then I have another Kleinow thing, and going to a show in St. Louis, and then it's NCA, so traveling out near DC. It's gonna be nonstop.
Yeah,
it's busy, but hopefully some of those end up being fun.
Yeah, I think so.
It sounds like some of them could be fun.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the Chicago weekend with my sister, and like we managed to get an Airbnb where I can bring my cat with, so she gets to see him again. And
nice,
and he'll like that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not the travel part, but he'll like once he's there.
You know, he's actually really good in the car. He hates getting into the carrier, but once he's in the carrier and he's in the car, he's fine.
Okay.
Actually, that's how my cats are for the most part. Like, once you get them into the carrier, get them into the car, they kind of just lay down, take a nap.
Exactly.
And it's really getting them into the carrier where they want to, take your face off.
They've accepted their fate by that point.
Yeah,
I guess I'm here now.
Truly.
They're truly realist. And I used to have a cat that when you'd put her into the car, for the first 30 minutes of a trip, she would just scream incessantly. And then I think she just wore herself out and just went to sleep. And you were like, oh, okay, well, don't wake up. Nobody make any loud noises.
Yeah. Well, like, I remember when I first brought Faramir home, my mom and sister brought him halfway, and I met them halfway. So I had 6 hours to drive home. And as soon as I got in the car and, like, tried to get going again after lunch, he freaked out. And then the first time that I took him to Petco to, like, get him a harness and all that, he freaked out. And I was like, oh, yeah, last time you got in a car, you switched humans. It's like, no wonder you're freaking out. No, it's okay. You're still coming home with me.
Yeah.
And Wesley hasn't had a major freak out yet, so that's nice.
I had to give my cats their flea medicine. When was it, yesterday? I guess I gave that to them. And my female cat, who's older, she doesn't mind getting hers. Like, she's not happy about it, but like, she's fine with it. She's had enough time. My younger male cat, he like runs and hides. Like, as soon as I get the box out, he recognizes the box and he runs and hides. So he averted me all day. And so I had to wait till I got home, and he sleeps under the covers of my bed. So I went in there and I saw his little lump under the covers. And so I just went and got the flea medicine, and I came back in there and just pulled the covers back real quick, and he like turned and looked at me like he's in a horror film, and I just grabbed hold of the back of his neck and put it on there real quick. So I feel like now he'll never sleep under the covers again. Or he'll sit there and have nightmares while he's under them. So I may have traumatized him for life.
Nah, he'll forgive you.
I must say, my mom is going to love the beginning of this podcast. She's a cat person.
There we go.
We're creating exclusively content for Mario's mom this week.
That's like my mom will try to listen and she just gets lost because she's not into video games. But you can send this one and be like, look, doesn't matter if you're into video games. Listen to the beginning of
The
this.
first 7 minutes, It's right up your alley.
Same for my mom. She would enjoy the opening. After that, she won't care at all.
So what I'm hearing is that this is the mom episode?
Yes. Actually, I might send this to Sandy because the first episode we ever did of the podcast, she saw me the next day and she was like, I tried listening to it and I really liked it up until you got talking about the games. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And she said, it sounded good. I was like, yeah, I think that's where we lose most of our audience.
Yeah.
We should really, just pivot. And this is no longer the Saluki Gamescast. This is Saluki Petcast. That's our focus from now on. All the moms.
You know what? We'll just bring back all the Playing for Pets vibes, and there you go.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll do that. Next time we do Playing for Pets, we'll do an entire episode focused on pets. We'll just invert everything.
Pets in video games.
Yep.
There we go.
Yeah. What is your favorite dog you can pet in a video game? We'll try to get the person who runs that Twitter feed on here.
Yes.
I did read one time developers hate that guy because now they all have to spend time and effort to program that into their games so that you can interact with the dogs. And he made some comment about, well, I didn't mean this to be a burden. It's supposed to be fun.
I was watching a friend play Hades, and he finished up a run, and as he was going to start, I was like, hold on, wait, can you please pet Cerberus for me? Thank you, appreciate it. You may
Cerberus,
continue.
you're a good boy, and a good boy, and a good boy.
There's an achievement in Final Fantasy 16, so they make you pet the dog.
I love that.
I've seen a few games where you do get an achievement or some reward if you stop and pet the dog. So,
And then there's me. I just remember watching videos of speed runs of Breath of the Wild where it's like, okay, how fast can you pet all the dogs? But then also how fast can you put butter on all the dogs? And just the weirdest stuff.
you should not butter a hot dog. That's weird.
What if it's a cold dog?
Don't eat those. You'll get salmonella. All right. Well, let's move on to what you've been playing. Sorry, moms. This is the point you can tune out. Alicia, what have you been playing?
So I have finally gotten the chance to start playing the Teal Mask DLC of Pokemon Violet.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm super far in. My guess would be I'm maybe a third of the way in. But I am honestly having a great time. On the one hand, it's hilarious because you're in this new region and they bring back a lot of familiar Pokemon who we haven't seen in a while. So Bellsprout and Hoot Hoot and all these Gen 1, Gen 2 Pokemon. But they also know that it's DLC after you've beaten the game. So you're seeing level 63 Bellsprout, level 70 Hoot Hoot. And you're just these are Route 2, Level 2 Pokemon. Yeah. So that's sparking quite a lot of joy in my life. But also I think that this is really continuing the trend of Gen 9 has the strongest story in a Pokemon game. Probably, a lot of people say since Black and White. I think ever.
This is currently Gen 9?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm still mind blown by the Professor twist at the end of the main game and
Right, that was our best story moment of last year, or it was one of the two. I forget if it was one or second place.
I mean, that's still, I think, is one of the... And then I was watching a YouTube video and someone pointed out even, when you go back to Gen 1, the Gen 1 remakes, so not the very original, but Fire Red and Leaf Green, if you interact with the TV in the player's home, the text box will be mom's watching a movie about four friends, they're at a railroad track. I better get going. And in Gen 9, before you go down into Area 0, Arvin makes a comment that the professor's really just railroading you. Well, that reference in Fire Red Leaf Green is to the film Stand By Me. And what are they searching for in that film?
A body.
What does the professor turn out to be?
Wow.
Just like
Yeah.
the thought put into these things blows my mind. And I think Teal Mask is really continuing. Kieran is my child. I would die for him. I just want to protect him and keep him safe forever.
So this is new story content. Is it story content set within the already established world, or is this adding new areas to the game?
It adds a new area. So the main game of Scarlet and Violet takes place in Paldea. In the DLC, you're going as like an exchange student to the region of Kitakami.
Okay.
And
has that appeared in a Pokemon game before?
No, brand new. And so you get there, and it's kind of a group exchange. So you have students from your academy, which now I forget what the name for it is in Scarlet because it's different in Scarlet and Violet, but your school, and then from Blueberry Academy. And of course, the two from Blueberry Academy are from this village. So like you go and meet their grandparents and you get to know them. And it is just really charming and also really fun in terms of Kitakami has all this lore around the Loyal Three and this myth about there was an ogre who came down and was attacking the village, and the Loyal Three were 3 Pokemon that fought it off and were killed. And so every year they do the Festival of Masks to like honor the Loyal Three and all that. And then, so what you're doing in the first place is your first assignment as part of this exchange program is to partner up with one of the students from Blueberry Academy and go around and visit these signs that explain the myth and explain kind of the history of the region. And as you're doing that, of course, you find out more, and I won't say all that because it's still early enough that I'm like, spoilers. But it's just really, I think that this is, again, I think that this is Pokemon's biggest lore development in a game. Because I think a lot of the lore in Pokemon tends to come more from the manga and the anime than the games, whereas with Gen 9, they're really interested in, like, what does the history of the world look like? What does the future of it look like? How does history get twisted by being drowned out by the loudest voice?
Right.
So I'm really enjoying it so far. Like I said, I'm not super far in. I've found 2 of the 3 signs, but I know that there's more beyond finding all 3 signs. So I'm having a good time. I really hope that I have a chance this weekend to sit down and just play for more than 30 minutes.
Right. Is the lore within the anime and the manga and the games, is that all like a shared continuity? Or
Typically,
I mean,
yes in some ways and no in others. So
does Ash exist within the manga and the games, or just the cartoon?
So Ash is specific to the cartoon. The manga and the games connect more in terms of, so what the manga does is always the player character and the rival character, every time they start a new gen, the player character and the rival character become characters in the manga. So like when it first started, Red was the name given to the player character for Gen 1, and Blue was the name given to the rival character for Gen 1. Mm-hmm. And so as the games have gone on, like even in Gen 2, Blue is the established 8th gym leader after Giovanni's out of the game. And then as you keep going through, I think Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon brought back Red and Blue, where like you could choose to fight against one of them and test your skill that way. So in that sense, there's continuity, but also the Red and Blue of the games are not exactly the Red and Blue of the manga. Like in the games, Red is silent. He says he says like 5 words over the course of all of the games, including like Pokemon Masters and other spin-offs. He is not silent in the manga. He is a little chatterbox.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an adaptation issue, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can't, the silent protagonist doesn't work in some mediums.
Yeah. And so, like, a lot of, like, the world lore in terms of, you know, people still catching Cook Farfetch'd with its leak that it has, and, like, that's a thing. But the characters don't necessarily cross over. And then there's a lot of stuff with, like, Yellow is my girl. I love her. And, like, there's development with how she can communicate with Pokemon telepathically because she's a child of Viridian Forest. Like, she was born there. She grew up there. And, like, you find out that Lance, who was the final member of the Elite Four in Gen 1 and the champion in Gen 2, also can. You get a lot more with... And I'm speaking mostly to early manga because I think I fell off somewhere around Ruby and Sapphire. So, like, most of my Pokemon manga knowledge is Gen 1 and Gen 2.
Sure.
But, like, in Gen 1, several of the gym leaders are members of Team Rocket. And so you get really interesting explorations with that. And that's one of the things that has never been in the games. It's been implied in a couple of them, but in that, like, again, the characters in the games and the characters in the manga, they share a name, they share a face, but they're not the same people.
Right. Okay. I wasn't sure how, I knew, like, Ash, like, wasn't in any of the games that I was aware of, but I didn't know if, like, at some point the games were like, and a long time ago, there was a great gym leader or, you know, great
No.
Pokemon master, and by the name, he had a special Pikachu, and
No,
like, they
for a
just
while,
did
people-
those sorts of illusions.
For a while, people tried to figure out, because again, Ash and Red look identical, because Ash is based on the game protagonist, just like
Right.
Red is. But so for a while, there was a theory that Red would be revealed to be Ash's father, but like Delia Ketchum's never in the manga. There's no, and also Red and Yellow special shipping forever.
Doesn't Ash's mom end up, like, dating Mr. Mime?
No,
Yes. Mr. Mime is Ash's stepdad.
stepdad, sure, but
How is he his stepdad and they're not dating? Like, that's even weirder.
because he's in the house and he takes care of him.
But the mom and Mr. Mime aren't actually dating.
No.
They're married.
Is
No.
that what they just tell Ash?
Obviously, if
Like,
we're
is that-
shipping Ash's mom with anyone, it's Professor Oak, okay?
Does Ash wake up in the middle of the night and Mr. Mime is walking out of his mom's bedroom and he's like, oh, you know, like, what's going on here? And Mr. Mime is, you know, he can't say anything, so he's like wildly gesticulating, which just makes it worse. Like, there's no gesticulating that would actually be clean in that scenario. All right. All right, so it sounds good. Sounds like you're pleased with the DLC, which is, like, not always the case with DLC.
Yeah. No, I do think that this one's worth it. And like I said, I'm guessing I'm only a third of the way in. You know, I know that you get to battle the Loyal 3 at some point, and, like, I'm nowhere near that. But beyond that, I have no idea what's coming next. So
Sure.
I'm guessing where I'm at, but I would be very happy if I kept playing and found out, like, LOL, no, you're like an eighth of the way through. There's so much more to do.
All right, well, that sounds good. All right, is that it? Pokemon DLC?
Yeah, I did open up Pokemon Go again, but I haven't, like, opened it a lot. I'll be real. I opened it because the notification popped up on my phone that Girafarig was in the spotlight, and I was like... But really, now that I caught a shiny Girafarig during orientation week, I'm like, do I need to do anything more?
It's the ultimate orientation.
Yep.
All right, Mario, what have you been playing?
Yes, I actually played a lot this past week. I think I mentioned last week that a friend was doing a little game event. He was starting an event over the course of the next month. So the 3 games that I played for that and beat are GoldenEye, Super Buster Bros, and Elephant Quest. GoldenEye is GoldenEye for the N64.
How do you feel it holds up? Because I feel like I hear a lot of people nowadays saying, I went back and played GoldenEye, and this game is terrible now.
So I never played it as a kid. The first time I'd ever played it was like 2 years ago.
I think you talked about that before.
So I think it's fine. Spoiler alert, it will not be an answer for a question that comes up later in this show. but I think it's a pretty fine game. I think that the second half of the game, there is a pretty massive difficulty spike. The levels in the second half of that game, and the same thing happens in Twine, the other James Bond game on the N64. The World Is Not Enough. The second,
not to be confused with Twine, the narrative crafting software.
yeah.
Or the string.
Yes, not to be confused with a ball of string. Mario is not a cat.
The levels in the second half of that game are a bit rough, but I think it's fine. It's a game of its era, and if you've never played it, I would say it's worth experiencing. But I wouldn't be surprised if somebody was like, "Oh, I don't really love it," but it has its spot in history for a reason. I think that playing the online is a great nostalgia revisit for a lot of people. And even having never played it, it's still just a lot of fun if you're with a good group of people. But I can't really speak as to how well it holds up. I'm also just not a big first-person shooter person to begin with. So I think the biggest complaint that I think most people would have going to it nowadays is that controlling a first-person shooter on the Nintendo 64 is kind of a nightmare.
Yeah.
Just because, the 2 sticks has become the way that shooters control. And so having the C buttons and the control stick is just a very different thing. Being not a very big shooter fan, it works well for me, but I could understand why people would be really frustrated with it.
It's hard to go back to games when we've sort of codified or, this is the way this genre controls. And, you go back to a game in the early days of that genre and try to play it. Even Mario 64 has some of that problem of, the gameplay's still really good, but the camera controls are a nightmare for somebody who didn't play it originally, right? Because it's sort of completely against the way you think it should work. And I think, I could see a first-person shooter fan going back and trying to play GoldenEye today and being like, why in the world would they make it this way? Why am I having to hold the R button to free look around and everything?
Yeah. And the other 2 were the first time I'd ever played them. Super Buster Bros is a Super Nintendo game. I don't even know how you would describe it. There are these falling, bouncing balls, and you have to shoot them. And you are a kid with a sort of gun thing that shoots the balls, and they split in half into smaller balls. And you shoot them until they're all gone. And so
it was a simpler time.
it was fun. It's tough. I mean, I played on the easiest difficulty, and it was still tough. But yeah, it was fun. And then Elephant Quest is not one that I had played, but apparently a fairly well-known Flash game that people played a lot.
Yeah. I've never heard of Elephant Quest.
That's fantastic.
It was fun. Yeah, it's fun. It's quick. And so those were the 3 that I've played. Like I said, I'll probably play more over the next.
What is Elephant Quest?
It's a 2D sort of adventure game. You go and collect items, and there are the side missions, and the overarching goal is to get your hat back from the woolly mammoth that stole it from you.
I love that.
Okay. I mean, is it a Zelda sort of adventure?
No, it's not so much a Zelda, and I guess the reason I'm saying that is because you shoot like a laser, as compared to sort of close-up combat. The combat is more from a distance.
as opposed to when your sword fires a laser blast.
Fair enough.
To be fair, that only happens when you're at full health.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, but it is similar in the sense that there are 4 different areas, and you navigate those areas. You collect keys. You do quests that give you different items that help you along the way. So it is very Zelda-esque.
I just wonder, when you say an adventure game, that's
Sure.
why I was wondering, like, are we talking that style of adventure game, a Monkey Island style adventure game?
No, I guess in that sense it is much more Zelda style.
Okay.
And so those are the 3 that I played for that. And then the other one that I checked out is Lies of P, which it's, a Souls-like Pinocchio game. I
You
think
say that so like that's not the
Obviously.
most bizarre thing in the world.
It's a natural merger.
if I had to put it into a combination, it's like, Bloodborne is the game that it gets, I feel like, compared to the most in terms of like its aesthetic. I have never really played much of the Souls games, so I don't have like the gameplay experience with them. Friends who have played them say it plays more like Sekiro because there's a emphasis on like perfect guarding. But then there's also Bloodborne similarity in that you need to be more aggressive. If you're just sort of waiting around, you will absolutely get owned. So it's Bloodborne / Sekiro combined with Pinocchio combined with iRobot.
Okay.
Because the like premise of the game, and this is stated really early on, is that at least the iRobot movie, I don't know about like the original Asimov books,
Very
but
different, but
yeah, in the sense of like there are 4 laws of puppets, and the first 3 are basically Asimov's laws of robotics, and the fourth one is a puppet can't tell a lie. But as Pinocchio, lying is like part of how you navigate through the game.
Okay, so it's a game that encourages children to lie.
I don't know if it necessarily encourages it. It's an option.
Okay.
I will say, I mean, I guess I don't know what it does if you don't lie for the first option that it gives you. You do definitely probably have to lie the very first time you're given the chance to.
All right. So I see this is a morally corrupting game. I will
time to break out the Supreme Court case. Can't deal with any local courts here. We gotta go straight to the top.
But did you like it? Like,
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the Souls games are not something I have a ton of experience with, so I don't have like this is scratching an itch that I have. But I will probably go back to it. I played it for maybe about 2 hours a couple days ago, and it's one I would continue on. I don't know if I'm the like hardcore level of gamer that will like continue to bash my head into something that I am failing over and over and over again, which I anticipate I will do with this game. But yeah, it's one that I'll keep going back to.
all right. That game has a really cool look. It's one I've wanted to try out, even though, sort of like you, I'm not the biggest fan of that genre, but just the look of it, like it has that great design.
Yeah, it looks great. Friends who have more experience with the games, one of the things they really like is there's somewhat of a customization to like the weapon system where you have like both the blade and the handle, and those do different things. So from what I understand, there's some amount of like mixing and matching that gives more control over the way you stat up and play the game and engage in combat. So the friends who I've seen in Discord who have played it are seemingly really enjoying it, and they are bigger Souls-like fans than I am. So
Yeah.
with that being what seems like is the target audience, I mean, I'd say that that's a good sign. And as somebody who isn't the target audience, I'm having a good enough time with it to go back to it again.
That's good. I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot of success of really copying that formula. I mean, I know people will jump in and all, like the Star Wars Jedi game is sort of a copy of that. And this game's, but, it's sort of been formed softwares like, and theirs alone from software, sorry. It's sort of been their thing alone, right? And to see a sort of big budget, good looking clone of it that's actually seems to be effective and doing something slightly different, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, especially one that really tries to mirror the aesthetic of it as well. I feel like Souls-like gets placed onto like a lot of
Right.
games. Like I feel like people called even like Breath of the Wild when it came out, like there's a difficulty spike compared to other Zelda games where they would call that like you're gonna die in this game a lot, whereas you could go through Ocarina of Time and like potentially never die because of the ways that like health and enemies work and all that sort
Right.
of stuff. Tunic was, I know, another game that people called like somewhat Souls-like, and just that, I mean, I don't know, I think it's a little if like Souls-like just means that this game is hard, but
Right.
having played some of Tunic, like I can understand, because that is a hard game.
Yeah. I mean, it becomes a little reductive, right? Like if we're just saying it's a Souls-like, and that means it's a hard game.
Yeah.
Because there were hard games long before Dark Souls came along.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, Lies of P is definitely going for that similar aesthetic to the Souls-like, particularly Bloodborne, as I'm sure if you've seen it, it's pretty easy to tell.
sure. All right. OJ, what have you been playing?
So, for my birthday, I asked for Mortal Kombat, and so I had to pre-order. I asked for it on the Switch, knowing that the graphics wouldn't be as good as, say, if I got it on the PS5. Right? I knew it wouldn't be, but then I would be able to like take it with me and play while we were watching TV or something, rather than having to wait until everyone was asleep to play. So, first, before I even get into the Switch stuff, I was a little disappointed in the game. And so the story the story is, yeah, you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure Justin is not
Not dying.
suffering a fatality here. So
Get over here.
So you can potentially finish the story of Mortal Kombat 1 in one sitting. It's not.
Wow.
Yeah, there's not a lot there. And
After
also,
all that they hyped were like new twists on the story.
yeah, and what's there is good. Don't get me wrong, I like it. And I like some of the changes. I like how they addressed it. As far as a timeline type story, I think it's pretty good, but it's very short.
It's about 4 hours, I think.
Yeah.
That if you just plow through it, you
Yeah.
can get through.
Yeah. Well, okay. So hold on. I have more to the story, but so I asked for it on Switch for my birthday. It came as the pre-order. I got it a little ahead of time, and as I mentioned before, I have a first generation Switch, and so there was a 30 gigabyte download to just start the game, to just start it, and my old Switch. My original first gen one didn't even have that on it, and I had avoided getting a micro SD card until now, just because I would just erase whatever. I would only keep what I was actually actively playing on it, right? Because like the Switch will save all of your save states in the cloud. But it was my anniversary, and so my husband bought me another Switch, a current gen one. So to answer the question of who's still buying Switches, apparently it's me. So I got an OLED one, is a Tears of the Kingdom one. So it's the most recent one, I think. Top of the line Switch, right? Put the game in, did this 30 gigabyte download, and it took like 2 minutes, I think, to just start up, just to get to a menu. And it's slow. Like loading times, like it'll load for like 30, 45 seconds. And that's a good time, right? It's longer actually if it's attached to the dock and going on the TV. I'm not entirely sure maybe it's a different, like, what's the word? Like a resolution or something that has to do.
Well, I know we've talked about, like, right, there's no processing power in the dock, so it's, if anything, it's still just doing it on the system, and then, so I guess that, I mean, it does make sense in some ways.
So, but again, I was just playing it on the Switch, and brand new Switch, top of the line Switch, and it's still like sometimes there'll be 2 or 3 minute load times. So as I jump into the story, it crashed a few times, first of all, but the graphics in the story are good until it starts to actually render them, right? So it's one of the most beautiful games on the Switch during the video parts, right? And then it switches to, oh, hey, we're going to render, which it does for maybe like 20, 30 seconds before a fight starts, right? So you have all these fantastic graphics, and then there's a loading screen for like 10, 15 seconds in the middle of a sentence as it's getting ready to go into a fight. And then everything changes to these horrible graphics that like the PS1 beats.
This is sounding more and more like Sonic 06, and I'm loving it.
I was just about to say the same exact thing. I was like, long loading times, bad graphics. We've talked about it. OJ, you're ready.
Yeah. And so, and you play through, there's not a lot of characters that are, I mean, there's a lot of characters. There's not a lot of like main characters that you get right at the beginning that you like. So Sindel has always been my favorite. And so she's there, right? But you can't play Sonya yet. You can't play Jax yet. And it's okay. It's rough, but so I do have Sindel. But as you're going through the story and you're playing something, they made a choice to not have fatalities in the story.
What?
Yeah, so you can't do a fatality in the story. There's no finish him or anything in the story. And
what even is Mortal Kombat without fatalities?
Exactly. So you go through the storyline. You don't do any fatalities, which I guess kind of makes sense because the characters are staying there, but like it's never been realistic, right?
Yeah.
So
look, I've never even played any Mortal Kombat, and I still am like, what? How do you do this without fatalities?
Sure.
Yeah. And I mean, there are like, you start off and like the characters, so this isn't really a spoiler because it's right at the beginning, but like, and you already know it from like the trailers, but like Raiden doesn't have any powers when he starts. Raiden and Kung Lao are both just regular people that have been like training to fight a little bit, right? They have no powers. Kung Lao doesn't have his hat. Nothing like that. You find an origin story for his hat in the story right at the beginning, but you're playing. You don't have all of your moves, and you're fighting against people who do have all of their moves, and it's not difficult, but the Switch controls kind of made it difficult. It's not really super responsive, I think, because it's just using every single resource that the Switch has, and then so like it's like because right when it started I was like, oh, what are people saying with these graphics being bad? And then it switched to rendering them, and I was like, oh. And there's a filter that I've seen a lot of, and it makes somebody's face look like they're surprised and their eyes are open and bugged out, and their mouth is just like open, and they look like
Surprise
traumatized.
Pikachu?
Yeah, kind of. And so that's what it looks like then when it starts to actually render them on your system. Then it goes into the fighting, and like I'm not looking for the best graphics in the world when you start fighting, but it's rough.
PS1
Maybe like
quality.
any graphic.
Yeah, and like I was thinking, I was more impressed with the graphics of Mortal Kombat 2 when I originally played it than I was at the graphics in this game.
Well, this is Mortal Kombat 1.
Yeah,
so
that's fair. That's fair. But even was it Ultimate Mortal Kombat? I can't remember I think it was on GameCube maybe or N64. One of those.
Yeah,
systems.
there was Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3.
Okay, yeah, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 looked better than it does when it's rendering on the Switch.
The thing that's weird is, like the last Mortal Kombat 11 came out on the Switch, and generally people praised it as looking pretty good for the Switch.
Right.
Like, I mean, it didn't look as good as on PC, but like it looked pretty good.
Yeah, and they did not do that for this one. And then, you know, like I'm playing and the controls are not responsive. Like I will do down to back and my character will just jump up. Like, and I know because I'm using the D-pad to actually do it, not the stick, right? I'm using the D-pad down to back, and it's like, what is wrong with this? Like, so it's not hard, but it's hard because of the controls, because it's not responsive. And like, okay, if the graphics aren't super good in when you're fighting, when it's actually rendering them, I was expecting that for the Switch. But like, so like playing through and doing all of this, there is test your mights, which luckily you can turn off, or I would still be in the middle of the story, because you have to tap, and you could do X, Y, A, and B on the right side, and you have to tap them, and it has to go up through this thing, and then you hit like the ZR button, like the right trigger. And like I'm very proficient at this and anything else, but I just couldn't get it done. And like I said, luckily you can turn it off, because like the first one was like halfway up the meter you had to get, and I barely got that. The second one I couldn't. I like 30 or 40 tries, and I couldn't do it.
Is it mashing, or is it pressing the right button?
It's
and
mashing.
Like rhythmically. Okay.
It's mashing. I tried doing it rhythmically, but it shows it on the screen, and they're all just blinking on and off too.
Mashing on a Joy-Con also just seems rough as well.
It really is. Yeah.
And that's an accessibility issue that a lot of games have kind of gotten away from, because people with any sort of like, you know, physical disability like have a lot of difficulty doing those sort of mashing things. I know the God of War games have switched over to where it's just hold a button instead of mash it.
Yeah. And so I think that's why you can turn it off, because to give them praise, the accessibility features on this game are fantastic. It has a built-in screen reader if you need it. You have the option to change the music so it gets faster as someone gets closer to you and gets slower as they get farther away.
So that people who are blind can play the game.
Yeah, like if it weren't on the Switch, I feel like someone who is blind could get something out of this game. But on the Switch, again, the controls are just not reactive enough for it.
I like the idea. Haven't blind people suffered enough without making them play the Switch version?
Yeah. And then that's not counting the glitches, even that. So like at one point I had Sub-Zero and Sub-Zero and Scorpion fighting, and then there was a visual glitch where right at the top of their legs, a big thing poked out and was pointed towards each other's faces. And so
Use the Schwartz.
Yeah.
OJ, I don't know how to explain this to you. But when a Scorpion and Sub-Zero really love each other,
That's not a glitch.
Yeah, I wasn't complaining, but it was, and then so I'm just like, what is going on here? Some of the more well-known ones are if you do decapitation brutality, which everyone can do right off the beginning, the head just floats there. Some people have said they've seen it where it doesn't. I didn't. I did quite a few, and the head just floats there and is just sitting there.
Some people have claimed they've seen where it doesn't float.
Some people have claimed that they've seen the head actually disappear.
Yes. And
On today's episode of Ghost Hunters.
Yeah, we're getting to spooky season early.
and so, like I said, Sindel is my favorite character. And so I went through there's an invasion part, so after you beat the story, which is only like 4 hours, which you do in one sitting, then you can do an invasion, which is kind of a little bit of a story, which you go to Johnny Cage's house and you're walking through his house doing different fights. And so, I'm playing Sindel. I can do fatalities there. And so the fatality that she starts out with is she walks up and grabs someone's head and says, like, "Who's your queen?" and then rips their skull out with their spinal cord. Okay? So on the Switch, because it's rendering her, she walks up and she looks like her face, her eyes are bugging out. And her lips look like she's traumatized. And then so she grabs it, and her hair, honestly, her hair looked better on the GameCube. Or N64, whichever one Ultimate Mortal Kombat was on. Every time I've seen her in a game, her hair has looked better than this. Like, honestly, like, if I made a game on PlayStation 1 and the hair looked that bad, I would be embarrassed. Like, it's bad.
OJ, stop hair shaming. she's having a bad hair day.
Yeah. Oh, yes, she is. And also because I think all of the hair is rendering, or all of the sheets of hair, I should say, are rendering, because it looks like some long pieces of paper popped out of her head. Really. Because those are rendering, it doesn't render you can customize the characters, and they each have like one piece of something you can custom. I mean, you can customize their full outfit, but everyone has like one special thing you can customize. And hers is like a little like tiara type thing that goes on her face. And so she walks up, it's close up to her face. She grabs the head and says, "Who's your?" And then the thing shows up on her head. It's missing up until this point. And then it renders, and then she says, "Queen." And as she starts to pull, it disappears again because I guess her face changed, and so it had to render it from a different angle. And then I've seen some videos from the other ones, and the fatalities look really gory and gruesome. I mean, they're not like super realistic, but they're gory and gruesome. They are not when it's rendering them on the Switch. It looks very much like Mortal Kombat 2 type, like weird random pieces of stuff that are sitting there. And I haven't, like, because I finished with the story and the invasion, and I tried to do the towers a couple of times, but it's just so bad I couldn't finish.
I don't think that a game has sparked this much frustration for you since Strangers of Paradise.
So, okay, here, if I were stuck in or if I were being tortured, okay, but I had a choice between playing Mortal Kombat 1 on the Switch or Stranger of Paradise with every sound in Stranger of Paradise being Titus's laugh, I would take that. I would happily take that because I haven't been this frustrated with just a horrible game. Like just
guys,
just
this
bad.
is a really weird Saw movie.
And it's bad. And like I said, I wish they would have made the story longer because the story was fantastic. But like they could have added like. I mean, granted, there's already a huge game with a 30 gigabyte download, but they could have taken off the few seconds of the actual stuff being rendered and just kept it FMV and fixed most of the problems, right? I'm sure they could have made the fatalities some type of like video rather than being rendered each time, and I think it would have fixed it, but they didn't. They just plopped it down with really, really, really bad things. And the Switch can't load stuff fast enough either.
I think the problem is that on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, all of that is fairly like seamless. So when you're talking about the cinematics and everything, that just transitions into the fights in a really seamless fashion. Yeah. And so I think they were going for that on the Switch is what it sounds like. But as you're saying, both the Switch doesn't have the power to do that, and it sounds like also this port was maybe either rushed or not given the resources that it needed.
Right.
Because certainly we've seen very good ports, like the Mortal Kombat 11 port is reportedly very good on the Switch. So
yeah. And I know that they've said, hey, we're definitely going to have an update on this, which they have to because like by the time the next Invasion comes out, because Invasions switch every month, I think. By the time the next one comes out, like I don't want to play it. And Mortal Kombat is one of my favorite series. Like I remember in middle school at lunch, somebody had a guide with all the moves, and I had a little notebook that I was writing all the moves and fatalities and stuff on, like hurriedly because it was just so great. And I've just been a huge fan. I was skeptical about the timeline restart from 11, but I think they did it really, really well. I think the story is fantastic, but like the game wasn't ready, at least on Switch. But I think a lot of people are I know people on PC are having a lot of crashes and stuff too. So I think it was rushed, and I wish they would have just taken a little more time.
It sounds like that Switch version is particularly like a real sort of train wreck.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's another big fighting game coming out soon. Isn't there like a new Tekken or something like that?
I don't think that's until spring.
Oh, okay. Because I remember, I don't remember where I was listening to it. It might have been this podcast talking about sort of the release schedule of Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and Tekken, and like how they're gonna sort of have to compete with one another and those release schedules. And so I wonder if if there was an awareness of release schedules, if it's we don't want to like fall too far behind type of thing, but and that's pure speculation. But
yeah, and I think there's also for those games. I mean, I don't think those games, given the market for fighting games, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to release a Mortal Kombat game directly against a Street Fighter game for either company. Right? Like you're just cannibalizing yourselves in what is a very small market compared to what it once was during the arcade days. But I think there's also a lot of pressure to get those games out in time for the like sort of fighting game leagues and everything. So to make sure that your game is out in enough time in advance so that it can be an Evo game. And qualify for these different like tournaments and stuff. So I think that becomes the issue when they're trying to schedule these games out and everything. But yeah, I mean, if you're putting out what are probably the 3 biggest fighting game franchises in the same year, you really have to space those out, because otherwise somebody's going to get killed in the process, right? Whereas the distance between Street Fighter, which came out back in June, and then now this. There's at least a little break there. Sure. Right? Somebody could have bought Street Fighter and saved up the next $60, $70 to buy this now.
When exactly did it come out? Do you remember like what the release date was?
Tuesday.
Oh, okay. I knew it was recent, but I didn't know when exactly it was.
And so I got it early because of a pre-order. They released it like the Thursday before. But yeah, Tuesday. There hasn't been any patches since then yet, but yeah. So, utter disaster there. And I've seen some people say, hey, maybe it's optimized for Switch too, which I mean, if they're backwards compatible,
yeah. I just think about if with patches, it sounds like you got to patch the whole game.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's. I can almost understand why it's maybe taken so long, because like we can't like incrementally roll this out. Like we'll take a little bit of extra time and like do a attempt to do a full thing. I don't even know what that would entail though.
Yeah, it's gonna be rough. But so since I got a new Switch and I needed something to like get the taste of Mortal Kombat 1 out of my mouth, I started playing I played a little bit of Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which I'd never played.
Nice.
And it's pretty good. I am enjoying that so far. I played a little bit of, what was it? Something else, which I didn't like. It was a Game Boy Advance. Or what was it? Dragon something. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Something that I'd never played the original games of. I'll figure it out later.
It was a Game Boy Advance game?
Yeah.
Was it on the
Switch Online?
Switch Online?
I played a more recent one.
Is that like a Dragon Quest?
No. It was it has Switch Fighters on it. It's where they came from, and it's like a tactical game.
Fire Emblem?
That's it, yeah, Fire Emblem. Okay. Sorry, I don't know where Dragon came from. I played a little bit of that because I never played the original, because I never really played Game Boy Advance games.
Right.
And then I went to Earthbound, which is a game that I play regularly. And I can just start playing it. It's a feel-good game. It's like, it's really a comfort game. I play it. It's probably for like the at least 20th time I'm playing through, if it hasn't been like 30th.
Alicia now understands.
Yeah.
I now do.
Yeah.
How far did you get into Superstar Saga? Is that one that you think you'll go back to?
Yeah, I will. I crossed it wasn't very far. I crossed the bridge into the bean area, and there was a jumping game that I played that I was stuck on for a while trying to get the last one. And then went in and learned how to do the jumps. And then that's as far as I got in it.
Yeah, that's definitely still early on. I asked because that might be like my most played Game Boy Advance game growing up. And
Yeah.
I love that game. I think it still holds up pretty well.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, some friends and I played through it last year, and so cool, fun.
I really like it.
It's a very good game.
Yeah.
Those Mario and Luigi games, for the most part, at least the early ones, are pretty good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so I'm going to go back to it after Earthbound, but once I get my brain on Earthbound, I can't do anything else until I stop. Which is where I'm the third most powerful person in the podcast came from, because there's an area. Sorry, spoilers for a game that's over 25 years old, but there's an area where there's 5 moles, and they're all bosses, and each one of them says, "I'm the third most powerful master in this dungeon."
There are 2 more powerful than me and 2 weaker than me.
And so that's actually where I ended up. So that's why it was in my brain. But then I love Earthbound so much. It's as close to a perfect game as anything else if there was a perfect game I had to give, it would be at least in my top 3.
Unfortunately, that's not our big question this week.
Yeah.
It would definitely work.
It could have been.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm cleansing my palate, and then I'll if there's a Mortal Kombat patch, I'll give it another go just because I really love the game. But it's so bad.
I don't know if it's on Switch Online for GBA, but if you haven't played it, I think it's coming to it at some point if it's not already. You should check out the Golden Sun series. I know how much of an RPG fan you are.
Yeah,
so.
and I played one of them on an emulator, I think, but it kept screwing up. And that's the one thing. This is the first time I played Earthbound not on an emulator in a very, very long time, and I will say that I'm missing the speed up feature.
Just get a bunch of skip sandwiches.
But still, at one point in Earthbound, you have to sit there for 3 minutes. It's the password is sitting there in silence for 3 minutes, and it's like, okay, let me just go I'll use the bathroom, get a drink, come back, and I haven't had to do that since maybe my 3rd or 4th playthrough since I've been playing it on emulators. So, but I am happy to know that I can get through it and probably not hit one of the weird piracy things that they have.
The piracy checks.
Yeah, because multiple times I got somewhere in the game on an emulator, and then no, you can't leave this area now or something. And at last, I know I've been complaining a lot, but so the first time I played the game, and I got it, and it came with a manual that talked about how to do all the stuff. And it was at Blockbuster, and I was the first person to rent it when it came in. So I did actually get the manual to see it, and it had that on the manual. But when you're fighting one of the bosses, Master Belch, you have an item that he really loves, and it's fly honey. And if you use it, then he goes crazy for it, and it's fine. And I didn't think to use it in battle, and so you can't beat him if you don't use it, or if you can beat him, you have to be really super mega leveled up, right? And it's just
I don't
horrible.
think it's possible. I think you need to have the jar of fly honey.
Yeah. And I remember the very first time I was playing it, I didn't read that. And I sat there and I was frustrated, and I was like, "Well, this is so difficult. Why can't I do it?" And then finally figured out what I could do. Well, even after playing it 20-something times, I totally forgot about that. And last night, as I was sitting there and playing it and fighting Master Belch, I was like, this is really hard. I remember not liking this place, but I don't remember why. And then 5 or 6 times into it, I was like, you know what? I swear, I don't know how I forgot that. There's just a block in my brain somewhere when it has to deal with fly honey. Okay, that's what I've been playing.
Okay.
Just a little story.
Yeah, that's disappointing about Mortal Kombat. I mean, it's sort of one of those games where you go, oh, wow, you're actually going to try to put this on Switch?
Yeah.
And, they've had success in the past. Mm-hmm. The same thing with Doom, right?
Yeah.
Doom 2016?
Mm-hmm.
They ported that to Switch, and it's supposedly really good on Switch. Not as good as it is on a PC.
Yeah.
But completely playable.
Right. And I wasn't expecting good graphics, but I wasn't expecting bad, bad ones either.
You weren't expecting broken.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the difference, right? You don't, you can expect the graphics to be
Yeah.
toned down quite a bit, but you don't expect it to be completely broken.
Yeah, and like I said, I got it on the Switch purposefully so that I could play it at and not just have to be like stuck to the PS5. And I knew that it was not going to be good, but I didn't know it was going to be that bad. Although I did play, so I played F-099 for a little bit too, which is pretty fun. I think I got 48th place one time, and that was it. So, but it's kind of fun. I'll play it again.
Yeah, I think this is just kind of going back to what we talked about last week with the Switch really starting to show its age, and these third-party ports are getting to the point where they just don't work anymore. And like you start to look at it and go, well, is it even worth the time and the energy for a company like Warner Brothers to put this out on the Switch because of the just the public relations hit they're going to take off of this. Like lots of people mad about the poor quality of this game, and you don't want that when Mortal Kombat has for so long been this jewel. And particularly these last 3 games, been nothing but universally praised. So that's disappointing. All right. Let's see. So I didn't play a whole lot. I played 2 things. I did not go back to Starfield this week. I might at some point, but as I worried, I just really lost interest in that game. I did go back to Pikmin 4, which I just love that game. That game's fantastic. That's one of the most fun experiences I've had with any game this year. It's just fun.
Did you get the doggo?
Yes. I've got the dog a long time ago. Yeah, he's fantastic. He doesn't have a nose, which is a little off-putting at first, but you get used to it.
A little Voldemort-esque, but okay.
And can you pet it?
Yes. So you can out of a sort pet it. Yeah.
That's all that matters.
Yes. So that is all that matters when we make games. It just needs an opening. Just make every game Nintendogs. That's all that we really need.
There we go.
The dog's utility, how useful it is, don't care. Can I pet it?
Yeah. But that's just really a fantastic game. And again, I think it's like the one thing that the Switch continues to do well is Nintendo's games continue to look fantastic. That game looks so much better than like when you look at third-party Switch games like Mortal Kombat 1 and you go, why do their Nintendo games look so much better? Like, why are they so much better at getting the look out of, this system, even when it's at its age now and really showing that age? But it has that great look to it. It's just a lot of fun. It's easy to pick up and play. I mean, there is a bit of a lengthy tutorial at the beginning, but once you get into the game, it's the easiest that series has ever been. And I keep going back to that because I just think if you played Pikmin 1 on the GameCube and you were like, oh, this isn't for me, I think it's time to go back and give that series another chance. And it's apparently been selling extremely well in Japan, which is nothing but great news to hear. The other thing I played this week is I did play some F-099. So F-Zero was one of 2 games I got when I got my Super Nintendo. It came with Mario World, and the other game that Santa brought me was F-Zero on it, and I loved it for that reason. And my brother and I used to trade who could get the fastest time on each level back and forth. And so this is just that. It's the original F-Zero, but they've, widened the tracks and stuff to make it playable with 99 cars and stuff. It's a lot of fun. I mean, I think most of the 99 franchise, I guess if you can call it that, have been fun games. I think, Pac-Man 99 worked really well. I think Tetris 99 is the best of that series. It's just, you play that and you go, oh, this is how Tetris should always be. This should be the multiplayer game for Tetris always going forward. And then playing this is just like, oh, okay, well, this just fits a lot more naturally than I would have thought. and it works really well, and it's fun, and you don't even care if you win. Like, you said you got 48. I haven't gotten a first place, but I did get like a top. What I think it was 12th. So top 12 finish, and it's just a lot of fun. I mean, it's a really cool thing, and when you think about it, it's sort of free. You have to pay for the online service, but it comes with that then free. Like Nintendo, I think, has been really clever in the way they've approached the online service with the, catalog of old games on there. And then like, okay, occasionally we're going to put out one of these online focused new games, but it's based on an old property. I wish they wouldn't take them away. Like I kind of understand with Pac-Man because of the licensing, it's not a Nintendo game, but like they took away Mario 35, which I just, I understand there's probably some resources with running a server for that, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like keep these going. Like they can't be that, costly for them to keep these up and keep them running. And they're just a lot of fun, and they like add a lot of value to that online service. And I think they should absolutely make a new F-Zero. Like do it tomorrow, Nintendo. Like that should be a Switch 2 game. Doesn't have to be launch, but very soon after. Like,
Agreed.
Go over the top, make a, even if I would take even a remake of F-Zero GX on the GameCube. Redo that game with high definition graphics, 60 frames a second. I'm good. Like just do something with it.
Yeah.
That's one of your best franchises. All right, that does it for what we've been playing. Let's move on to the news, and it was a big week in news, so we're going to try to rush through some of this because we got a whole lot to talk about. The biggest news was this Xbox leak. So I think this was this Monday that this all came out? So there is this leak. So court documents in the Microsoft Activision acquisition case against the FTC. Apparently, some documents have been uploaded to a server, but they had not been redacted. They had not been information blacked out of them like they should have been, and so these documents ended up leaking. These were pertinent to the trial, but not. They were internal Xbox documents, but not something they wanted to get out to the public because this basically is their plan over the next few years. They're a little old, so these are, I believe, a couple years old, but they do kind of spell out like what they plan to do over the next couple of years, both with hardware and software. So I think the biggest news to most people was they were planning 2 new Xbox versions of the current system. So a new Xbox S, codename Elwood.
I object.
So Elwood spelled like Elwoods from Legally Blonde, not Elwood as in Blues Brothers.
And if it's going to be named that, it better be pink.
Absolutely.
Yes. I mean, lean into that. Barbie's super popular. Lean into have a Legally Blonde Xbox.
Look, if you gave me a Legally Blonde Xbox, if they made a Legally Blonde Xbox, I would buy an Xbox. I've always been a PlayStation person, but I would buy an Xbox if it was Legally Blonde.
I'm just imagining like long blonde locks coming off of the box.
We need Bruiser, and we need to be able to pet him.
He's just there on the menu, running around, pulling icons off the side of the screen. Yeah, that'd be cool. And then the bigger news was a new version of the Series X, which is codenamed Brooklyn. There actually are some details on it. It's going to have 2 terabytes of storage, no disk drive, USB-C port on the front, and some additional upgrades like a smaller processor die and some other things that should make it more energy efficient. This is not a mid-level refresh, so this is not a like a PlayStation Pro or the Xbox. Oh God, what was that called? The Xbox One X, I think.
Oh, gosh.
Something like that.
It's so hard to keep the Xbox naming convention straight. But anyways,
The Xbox naming conventions are really just the same as the Fast and Furious movies.
yes, very much.
2X2
I was
box.
to say, yeah.
But like this is not that. This is just a new version of the current hardware that's out there. There are some internal upgrades, but they're not internal upgrades that are going to actually theoretically make the games any different. I think Wi-Fi 6 was one of the things that this was going to feature, so faster Wi-Fi on it. And the shape of it, instead of the current sort of obelisk that we have, is going to be a more of a cylinder. So it looks like the Mac Pro.
Remember, it's the adorable cylinder.
Yes, one of the slides did refer to it as adorable, which is weird.
Like, that's the word that comes to mind when you're thinking of a game console.
Yep.
Is it adorable enough?
Well, I mean, there was a time like the GameCube, right? The GameCube could be described as adorable. With,
Could it?
with the purple and the little handle.
Yeah.
Like it very
Cute,
much.
maybe. Adorable.
I don't know. You put a little smiley face on there, and then when you booted it up, it did the doo 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 doo.
Yeah.
So
They
I
had
don't
like an orange one.
Yeah, spice orange. Yeah, so like I think this was probably the biggest news that came out of this. Leaking new hardware. Supposedly this would be released next fall, and the Elwood Series S system would be released sometime before then. So people were speculating maybe spring for it, and then this for the fall. But like both of these are supposed to just be revisions to the hardware, nothing super dramatic. I don't know. Does this move the pin any for you? Do you have any greater interest in upgrading to an Xbox, given this new hardware revisions?
Not if it's not pink.
I have the Series S, and I'm fairly happy with it. I do think the no disk drive on the updated X is an interesting decision. I mean, I know that there's just a lot of conversations that happen about sort of the digital versus physical media and what it means when there is no sort of physical option, and the ways that a lot of media just sort of disappears and is not able to be recovered. Or there's just like no access to it otherwise. So I think that's, I understand why, but at the same time, I think it's a decision.
Yeah, so obviously the S has no disk drive currently, so the Elwood version theoretically would also have no disk drive. The X currently does, so apparently that model would stay on the market, and this new version of the X would also be on the market alongside it. So there still would be a model with a disk drive, but clearly Microsoft is trying to move customers away from physical media.
Yeah.
They're trying to move customers to buying things, and even more so with Xbox, subscribing to Game Pass.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, like, I know I say it's interesting, and I just said, oh, well, I've got the S, and so I don't have the physical anyways, and, Lies of P, I'm playing on Game Pass, and so, it's not that I don't appreciate, the digital media, but I do think that having some sort of archivable physical media is an important thing to have. And so it'll be interesting if after a certain amount of time, if this new one becomes more of like the dominant model,
Right.
if you stop seeing, certain companies like, well, we're not going to release a physical disc or that, we're not going to put the resources into the physical disc because it's just going to be available on the Xbox store. I mean, I guess I don't know how different it would be producing like a physical disc of a PlayStation 5 game as compared to an Xbox game. I imagine they use probably the same style of disc. If it's a
they're both
Blu-ray.
on Blu-rays
Okay.
now.
So maybe it wouldn't be much of a difference. But yeah, I think it's interesting.
It's still just like you said, even if you have moved to more of like digital typically, it's the fact that the option's gone and that it takes away that archive that exists when you have a physical disc versus when it's just on the cloud. Like we've talked before on the podcast about games just vanishing. And like, okay, nobody can ever play that again unless somebody got it figured out to get it on an emulator and all that. And yeah, this is what I've seen the most comments angry about is like people who are like, you know, it's fine to have a version without disk drive, but please still have a version with it, so that way I, as the customer, can make a choice on what I want.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're facing two things. So one is, Mario, you mentioned about, you know, not even putting out a physical version. That's exactly what Alan Wake 2 is doing. That game is going to be digital only, which is kind of weird for what is a big release,
game, yeah.
right? Like we see that with indie games all the time. The second thing is, yeah, I mean, this is where the industry is headed. Like, I mean, it's where PCs already are. Like,
and it's a profit thing, isn't it? Because now if you have to buy it through the Microsoft store, everything goes to Microsoft as compared to splitting with whatever third party retailer would be. So it would be a GameStop or a Walmart or
Yeah.
whatever.
And then they don't have to spend the money on getting cases and shipping them out. And
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of money lost on physical media in that way. The flip side of that is, right, that you lose that marketing chance. Like, you know, come Christmas, there are going to be a lot of parents who walk into Walmart and Target and Best Buy going, oh, Billy has an Xbox. What will Billy like? Oh, here's Bluey, the game. Billy likes Bluey, and Billy's like, I want Mortal Kombat. I want to rip somebody's head off. I don't want to play with those damn Australian dogs.
well, because you can't pet them.
No, I can almost guarantee you can pet the dogs in Bluey in the game. But, you know, like, that has always been very important for video game manufacturers as a way to market their games. Like, I think we often overlook that because we are very engrossed into this. We do a weekly podcast talking about video games.
Yeah.
We know what the cool new games coming out are for the most part. And there's a lot of families and stuff that are buying games, and not even just families buying a game for a kid or something. There's a lot of people, you know, like I'm always... Like, I think people who are really into movies often overlook the fact that there's a whole lot of people who just show up at a movie theater on Friday night and they go, what looks good? You know, they don't know what they're going to see. They haven't watched any trailers. They know nothing going in. And they look at the poster and say, oh, look, you know, Tom Cruise is in that. Let's go see that. And I think there's a whole lot of people who buy, like, Madden and Call of Duty, and they walk into the store and they've got $60 in their pocket and they say, that game looks cool. Look at that weird puppet guy. He's like cutting people's heads off, like Liza P. I don't know what that is. That looks cool. And that's how they make their decision on what games to buy. I mean,
shoot, even being into video games, there's a lot of times that I'm like, oh yeah, that looks cool.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not strange at all for that to be the case.
Yeah, but I think the strange part is what happens when that goes away.
Yeah.
And you are only buying games digitally, and what happens to that segment of the market. And I think that segment of the market is still a significant part, but Microsoft probably knows a lot better than us. Like, you know, they have all that tracking. Where are we selling copies of our games?
Well, I think because they have areas now too with digital codes where you can buy the fake game.
Sure.
But there's also a third level too, and that is people who don't really have access to good internet.
Yeah.
Like as we learned during the pandemic, large areas of Southern Illinois here where we are don't have the internet where they would be able to download these games. I mean, heck, with a 30 gigabyte download with Mortal Kombat, when I already got the cartridge or the whatever you want to call it, when the
Card.
yeah, the card, and like many people wouldn't have been able to do that here in Southern Illinois. And so if we have larger and larger games, like there's people who aren't going to be able to do it. Like there are areas in Southern Illinois where people don't even know anyone where they could go to their house and do a big download like that just because the infrastructure is not there. So like it's rough.
High-speed internet is in very urban areas.
Yeah.
And once you get out into more rural areas, more of your like kind of farm areas, which is what a lot of Southern Illinois is, those people tend to not have very fast internet connections. And
I can't even tell you, and even like talking about my house back in Minnesota, I cannot tell you the amount of times that we've like bought internet boosters and whatever to try and be able to like make our internet better because it sucks. And even with that, my sister still, anytime that she's downloading a new game or playing something via streaming, she has to bring her PlayStation upstairs instead of in the basement.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an entirely valid concern. It's a good one to bring up, OJ, about just internet speeds. And, that's also been a concern for people in the military, right? Who are like on bases where, and maybe overseas, and they want to travel with their Xbox and play the new game. And that's easier to do with a physical version than a digital version in a lot of cases. I mean, this is the future, and there's certainly financial reasons they want to move towards this, but there's still a lot of hiccups. And, obviously they tried to do this with the launch of the Xbox One. It was too early. There was a revolt. It ended up hurting them very much in market share. I think they'll be smarter about it this time, but obviously they did not want this to leak out this way because this looks bad. All that said, I have an Xbox Series X because it's more powerful. But when I bought a PlayStation 5, I bought the discless one because it was $100 cheaper, and I rarely buy physical games anymore. So, all right. So also as part of this, there is a new Xbox controller coming. So a few things kind of neat about this. It has haptic feedback. It has a rechargeable battery that is also removable. So unlike in the PlayStation where it's just built into the controller, this one you'll be able to remove. So if the battery wears down over time, as batteries do as you recharge them, you'll actually be able to replace this. So that's pretty cool. The other thing is that it pairs and connects directly to the cloud. So this is something that Amazon's streaming service did. They put out a controller for, I can't even remember what that's called now.
Roku?
No, it's their game streaming service on Amazon. And it, instead of connecting to your computer and then connecting to the internet, it just directly connects to your Wi-Fi. Because nothing's actually running locally on your computer. So all your commands are sent directly via Wi-Fi to the servers, right? So you're playing these games over the cloud and streaming them. So it's cutting some of the delay in there out by cutting out a middleman. So this would do the same thing. This would cut out connecting directly to the Xbox because it would actually connect directly to the Wi-Fi and then to the X Cloud servers, whatever they're called, and allow you to play the games that way. And theoretically, I think what is the bigger pitch of this is this will connect theoretically with televisions and computers and other things that you might want to stream games to. So, you wouldn't even necessarily need an Xbox. You could just directly connect and play games this way. So, a new controller. Also, as part of this, they talked about their plan to launch a next-gen Xbox. So this would be an entirely new generation of hardware in 2020.
The X and the box.
Yes, in 2028. And the one sort of tantalizing thing, they talked about a lot of kind of, techno babble as part of it. But the one thing that they did mention that sounded kind of interesting is that they expected cloud computing to play a significant part of this new system. They had pitched that previously with particular games. So I think most famously Crackdown 3 was supposed to have parts of the game running through the cloud to help manage some of the computational work on there. That ended up not happening in the way that they pitched it. And so, this, again, they're pitching this idea. This is still obviously 5 years away. So who knows what this will end up looking like by that time, if it'll actually work. But we do know they're at least planning a new generation of hardware.
Well, with that new generation, if they're going with the Fast and the Furious naming conventions, they could have Box 4 Xer
Or just X5.
Yeah.
Oh man, I watched that.
Box 7.
I watched that Fast X the other day. I hadn't seen it yet, the newest film.
Would it just be XX?
Yes.
When we get to 10?
I mean, look, we're getting very close to the Xbox just being pornographic at that point.
It's a box with 3 X's at the end. BOXXX.
Let's see. They also, some game titles also leaked. So one of these is Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, a remaster of it. This has leaked previously and been rumored. So this seemed to be pretty clear confirmation that they are working on a remaster of Oblivion. Also a Fallout 3 remaster, a sequel to Ghostwire Tokyo, which is a little not surprising that they might have been thinking about this at some point. It would be kind of weird if they did it still, because that game didn't maybe sell super great. But again, this is a little outdated, so some of these projects may have been canceled in the intervening time. A game called Doom Year Zero, which sounds like a prequel to the modern Doom games. And Dishonored 3, which again is not too shocking. The Dishonored games have done fairly well over the years. So Dishonored fans, something to be excited about. They also was a leaked email of them discussing Nintendo as the prime asset in gaming and being interested in acquiring Nintendo.
Tell me again you're not trying to build a monopoly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this has gotten a little bit misreported. The email is Phil Spencer saying, of course we would love to acquire Nintendo. They're not interested in us acquiring them. You know, I think on this podcast, we talked about the story that when they were making the original Xbox, they went to Nintendo and offered to buy Nintendo, and Nintendo literally laughed them out of the room. So, I mean, look, this is like one of those things. I think the actual context for this is everyone would love to buy Nintendo. PlayStation would love to buy Nintendo. EA would love to buy Nintendo. Nintendo's not interested in selling anytime soon. So
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it depends on how dated these are, but I know, you know, I'm sure it was purely speculation, but with how poorly the Wii U did, I know there were people who were like,
Yeah.
I wonder if Nintendo would move to just being a software company. But with how well the Switch did, I think it's safe to say that Nintendo is probably fine where they're at.
yeah, and that was the rumor, right, at the time with the Wii U, that Nintendo, much like Sega, may go third party. And that's actually what is said in this email, is that, you know, Phil Spencer says Nintendo needs to realize that they would be much more successful with their software on third-party hardware. Which, you know, like, that was not super successful for Sega, but Sega was in a much different position than Nintendo. Sega's in a pretty good position now, but they're not quite the same company they were during the Dreamcast days.
Sure.
Yeah.
So who knows with that. Let's see. So this just came out this morning. The UK CMA, which is the Competition and Markets Authority, has provisionally approved the Microsoft Activision deal after the sale of the cloud streaming rights to Ubisoft. So that was just for the Activision games. They're selling the rights to stream those on the cloud to Ubisoft, but just in the UK. So this was a provision that they made, and this morning the CMA, which was the last sort of group holding up this merger happening, provisionally approved this. So it sounds like everything should be good to go for this merger to finally happen, or this acquisition, I should say. So we may actually see Activision become part of Microsoft by the end of the year. Let's see. Mortal Kombat 1, some more bad news. It is getting review bombed in Russia and Belarus because they have blocked online play there. The game is actually blocked for sale there, but people manage to get copies regardless, as they always do. But they have blocked online play, so even if you get a copy in Russia, you can't actually play it online. I guess you can still play it locally, just not online. And hopefully you did not get the Switch version.
I was going to say, on the Switch, at least it connects online for a lot of things, like even the story mode. So
Yeah, a lot of the collectibles and coins and stuff like that, that's all done online. Let's see. Apple has said they believe the iPhone 15 Pro is going to be the best game console.
Oh my gosh.
Well, at least they finally moved to the USB-C, the superior data port.
I mean, a lot of this is just PR speak. But, you know, like they are making, look, they're getting the newest Resident Evil. They're getting Resident Evil 4 remake, right? These are things that aren't coming to Switch. So there is an argument to be made that having a 15 Pro that you can AirPlay to your TV and connect a controller via Bluetooth in some ways might be a better experience. We'll see. Like, it's going to have to be a lot more games than just Assassin's Creed Mirage and Resident Evil 4 remake. And then, what was the other one you said last week?
Death Stranding.
Death Stranding. I keep forgetting Death Stranding coming out. I think I just generally want to forget Death Stranding. Let's see. We talked last week about Unity and their new fee structure. Surprise, surprise, they backed off that new fee structure.
Wow, I'm so shocked that it.
Yeah.
The CEO, however, supposedly sold thousands of shares in the weeks leading up to that announcement of the fee structure, which sounds a little like insider trading.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things you can back off. Is any indie developer going to want to deal with Unity going forward? Like, can I trust you? You've already tried to screw me over once. Can I trust you not to do that again?
Yeah. So the makers of Terraria gave a lot of money to other small developers to not use Unity or something about that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but because they don't use Unity themselves for Terraria, but they gave money to other groups to say, hey, don't use Unity, use other stuff.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Not cool about Unity is they report. So apparently they have it set up so if you're making like a game for charitable causes, that you don't have to pay some of these fees. So they reportedly told developers they did not qualify for charity projects because the charities they were raising for were Planned Parenthood, which I get somebody who is extremely right-wing maybe feeling that way. The second one here is really weird. It was a children's hospital. And they said these did not qualify as charities. They were political groups, which sounds like a really right-wing belief system to get to a children's hospital as a political group. And the only thing I can imagine is that this has to do something with trans kids. That's the only logic I can make out of this with the children's hospital. I get the Planned Parenthood side. I don't agree with it, but I get where somebody who has that political belief could be upset about that. I don't get the children's hospital at all.
Those sick kids need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and cure their own cancers.
Yeah, it just seems so cruel.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems so, like, besides just being mean, it's just cruel.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Speaking of Activision, Nintendo reportedly showed Activision a Switch 2 in December of last year, December 2022. So, yeah, they've apparently had a prototype going around and showing that off for quite a while. Of course, we talked about last week that they were showing it at Gamescom. This is not surprising. All it does is sort of confirm that the Switch 2 is coming sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I don't think I said it last week, but one thing that I was thinking is that seems like the type of big announcement that, like, the Game Awards that Jeff Keighley does at the end of the year, that seems like one of those places that I could see something like that happening.
Yeah, we could see a tease for it there. And I think it just depends when that's actually coming out. If it's coming out in spring, like, that's going to be a bigger tease.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And if they wanted to show why we need a Switch 2, they've done it pretty well this week.
Let's see. Some media outlets got to play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, And the big news, at least that I've seen out of that, is that a flashback at the very beginning allows you to play as Sephiroth, which is apparently the first time you've been able to play as him, at least fully play as him in one of the many spin-offs and remakes and everything they've had. So I guess that's a minor spoiler, but it's the minor spoiler that I think is going to end up in a trailer eventually.
Well, my guess is it's the calm flashback to Nibelheim. So like it makes sense. And if it is that, it will be very early in the game.
Yeah. Let's see. Ubisoft announced The Division 3. This is coming from Massive Entertainment, who is also working on that Avatar game and Star Wars Outlaws. Avatar will be out this Christmas. I think it's supposed to be out in December. So anyways, it looks like they will pivot from that. I can't believe that studio is working on 3 games at a time other than maybe doing pre-production work. So probably that team that's been working on Avatar will switch over and work on that full time. Let's see. Crystal Dynamics, the makers of Tomb Raider, have announced layoffs as part of a restructuring. So remember, they are now owned by Embracer, who is selling off studios and firing people. This seemed to affect mostly the people working for them in like their PR and IT departments, so not the actual developers. But, obviously we wish those people well finding new work and everything. And so this ties into our big question. Our last news item just this morning announced Tales of the Shire, a game coming for PC and consoles in 2024. That's all. There's a trailer, which is just somebody flipping through a book.
And is that by the same people that made the Gollum game?
I do not think so.
Okay.
No, that studio shut down.
Oh, well, I feel bad now.
You should. You monster. And the reason I say that ties into our big question because it's apparently International Hobbit Day.
Yes, it is. Today is Bilbo and Frodo's birthday.
So our question is, what's your favorite game adaptation of another piece of media? So of a movie, a book, a musical album. Is there something that you really love that's adapted from another piece of media?
Justin, you're missing the second half of the question. The full question is, and why is it the PlayStation 2 Lord of the Rings?
Yes, well, that's Alicia's part of the question. So I think
I contributed the question, so I get to add that.
I think we already know Alicia's answer to this question, but we'll go ahead and humor her. Alicia, what's your answer?
Obviously, I really had to struggle with thinking about this, and I really had to narrow it down. No, it's PlayStation 2 Lord of the Rings. I would love to see a remake or a remaster, but honestly...
You're talking about those EA action games.
Yeah.
Like they made one of each novel. Okay.
Right. And
those are good games. Those are really great games.
They're fantastic. And what I really... what makes them still stand out to me today is, Lord of the Rings is something that we've seen fantastic adaptations and we've seen terrible adaptations. Sometimes from the same director. But the fact is, the best medium to adapt it is video games. Because you can create a 500-hour video game where you can get all those details from the book.
Please do not make a 500-hour video game.
Look, I would sink 500 hours into a Lord of the Rings game. That was good. But you can
There's
get
a
all that
difference
stuff.
between seeking 500 hours and the game itself taking 500 hours.
That's fair. But with a game you can get that stuff like Tom Bombadil that has never made it into any of the movie adaptations, and I get it, but also I want it. So it's got to be the PS2 Lord of the Rings. Fellowship, I remember, did a lot of the stuff with Frodo in the Shire still, and I want those back.
Gal, just play Lord of the Rings online. Latros is a perfectly fine MMO. I didn't have it on PS2. I had Return of the King on the GameCube, but yeah, that is a very good game.
I played Two Towers quite a bit. I had that on, I think, PlayStation 2, and it was a fantastic game. All right, Mario.
So I had 2 answers. The first one, I think it's fair to call this game a classic. I don't know if most people know it's based off of a book, though. Is Parasite Eve, the PlayStation RPG. And then the second one, which also might be weird because typically these games are terrible, it would be the licensed game for the animated movie Monster House.
Oh gosh, I remember that
It's a movie that came out in like 2006.
It was terrifying.
That game is awesome. It's essentially Resident Evil 4. It's baby's first survival horror game. That game is sick as hell. There's also a game within the movie, like an arcade game that they play, that they put into the game. It's called Thou Art Dead, and it's basically a Castlevania, like the old formula of Castlevania games that you can play through.
Right.
You collect like tokens in the house, and you can like play the game. It's a great game.
Huh. Now I want to play that because I actually really liked that movie when it came out. I thought that was a fun movie, and I knew nothing about the game.
And I think one of the things they do that's very cool is, I think one of the things that a lot of those movie games do is you play through the first hour of the movie where it's like nobody cares about what's going on, like get to the action. The game drops you. It starts you once they get into the house. So it just gives you like a real brief, like here's all the stuff and all the background on like why the house is scary and stuff like that. You get eaten by the house and you start inside the house. So you don't have to do all of like the lore building that nobody cares about in a lot of those games.
You're not having to do platforming through the neighborhood.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like old women are throwing shoes at you. You're like, what is this? This isn't in the movie. OJ.
Okay, so little known fact, there was a AAA movie in 1993 called Super Mario Brothers that the entire Mario franchise was based off of. It had John Leguizamo, Bob Hoskins, Dennis Hopper, and it's been a true realization of that movie through every game in the Mario franchise.
I remember the original Mario game, people feeling like it was a real departure from the movie.
No, I think it was frame by frame an honest representation of it. And by that, I mean, I couldn't think of something. So,
all right. I decided to go a slightly different route, and I chose Revolution X. So are you familiar with Revolution X, the arcade game? It is adapted from the music of Aerosmith.
Okay.
And it is Aerosmith music playing over every level while you shoot a machine gun that fires CDs at terrorists, and you are rescuing. I think you are rescuing Aerosmith, the members of Aerosmith. But that game
I
is.
feel like I remember this.
It was in arcades everywhere for a while. It is a stupid game, but it's a whole lot of fun as an arcade game, and it's pretty cool that it's playing Aerosmith. And regardless of kind of that they're terrible people now, apparently, but. The music's fun and everything. It made for a really cool, fun experience. All right, that does it for this week. As always, check out more stuff on SalukiGames.com. Subscribe, like, rate the podcast well. Thank you to all of our crew, and we will be back soon with a new episode. Bye.